Welcome everyone to the Trulioo webinar, Optimize Onboarding to Maximize Revenue. I'm Angie White, Director of Product Marketing at Trulioo, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can send them to us using the Ask a Question module on your screen. We'll try to cover as many questions as we can throughout the presentation, but we'll also allow some time for Q&A at the end. So keep those questions coming. We want to make it a dialogue. We will also be live tweeting this webinar, so you can join the conversation using the hashtag Finovate webinar. Today, we're going to dive into how to optimize customer onboarding to drive revenue gains. Joining me from Trulioo, I'd like to welcome Zac Cohen, Chief Operating Officer, and Alan Stapleton, Manager of Customer Success. Zac, Alan, do you want to take a minute to introduce yourselves to the audience?
Yeah, of course. Happy Halloween, everybody. My name is Zac Cohen. I'm the Chief Operating Officer with Trulioo. I'm really excited to be here today.
Hi all, thanks Angie. Yep, I lead the customer success team in EMEA. So yeah, delighted to talk to you all today and look forward to getting into it.
Thanks, Zac. Thanks, Alan. All right, so as we kick off here, I just wanted to set the stage for those of you that might not be familiar with Trulioo. We've been helping top global brands verify both people and businesses for over a decade. We help companies across a wide range of industries effectively onboard good users while helping with compliance needs such as KYB, KYC, and AML. Just to give you an idea of the breadth of our offering, we see traffic from over 100 countries on a daily basis. So when we talk about global operations, we're really talking about global. We have offices in North America, Europe, and Asia. So, that's something that's really important to us, having that global reach, but also that local expertise that's really needed within each of these markets. Enough about us. I'll move on to our state of identity today. So, Zac, could you talk about the market drivers that you're seeing in today's identity market?
Absolutely, happy to. And I think, these points really foreshadow what we want to dig into a little bit deeper today. I think we've all seen, especially since the pandemic, a massive increase in activity and participation around the world in our digital economy. More people want access, they require access, more of their life day to day is happening online. And so what that just generally translates to is an acceleration in digital identity requirements, in digital identity needs, and more interestingly, more nuance as we're trying to allow and enable more people to participate in our global digital economy. So whereas potentially 5 years ago, we saw it be more straightforward, now we're just seeing this massive influx of individuals in multiple parts around the world. What that's led to, of course, is organizations that want to access and acquire these people as customers to deploy a bunch of different solutions over and over and over again to try and access these new participants. And that's led to a lot of silos in terms of the technology and the processes that these organizations operating online have built out. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. The other piece that we're seeing, as always, is an evolving regulatory landscape. So I can just think of a few off the top of my head. More recently, right, the European Banking Authority has come out with new guidelines, new interpretations that are now being deployed and sort of translated by each member state all around digital onboarding. We've seen new acts like the Inform Act, more in North America, around marketplaces and what they have to do and when they have to verify and the stages they have to take for risk-based approaches. And just the ongoing and continuous change that regulators have forced digital actors and regulated entities to take into account as they operate online. Really interesting stuff that doesn't stop. And I think the last piece that we're seeing today, and this is more of a macroeconomic driver, is I think in 2019, 2020, even into 2021 to some regard, there was a land grab in many ways to access and onboard as many customers as you could. With the economic environment and reality of resources being tighter, of budgets being more strained, there's been a significant shift of digital players to go from let's onboard anybody at any cost to really focusing on what's a good user and how can we efficiently onboard those individuals most effectively. And that's really made that sort of switch to efficiencies and the cost of a good user online. And in light of that budgetary tightness, we just saw a recent study that came out by Battery Ventures that was, when we take a look at the top priorities for CXOs when it comes to technology budgets, the biggest percentage was vendor consolidation. 92% of respondents said vendor consolidation was a key priority for reducing their technology budgets, followed very closely by optimizing their SaaS licensing. So again, what we're seeing is a massive digital influx, tools being deployed, changing regulatory environments, and then this tightness that's shifting priorities and the requirements for organizations to efficiently and effectively operate digitally.
Thanks, Zach. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We're seeing that shift away from growth at all cost to really looking more holistically at the onboarding journey to see, are there areas for greater efficiencies, for operating efficiencies, and other avenues to drive additional revenue by onboarding additional customers. So I think that's a good segue to bring us to our first poll here. So what are the top priorities for onboarding optimization within your organization? Fraud reduction, maximizing growth, ensuring regulatory compliance, reducing customer acquisition cost, or vendor consolidation. Unfortunately, we don't have all of the above. I know that it's usually a balancing act for these types of things, but if you had to choose one, like what was the top priority that's really kind of driving onboarding optimization within your organization, what would you choose?
If you had that last dollar to spend, where would it go?
Exactly, yeah. And as we're letting people answer the poll here, so Alan, Zach, what are your thoughts on this? Where do you think, in customer discussions, where are you seeing the most need for optimization?
I think Zac touched on it really well there, right? We've definitely seen a shift. It's probably a course correction towards a more refined, precise onboarding, but the conversations we're having on a daily basis do have the element of onboarding good customers, finding those efficiencies, not necessarily top line growth, right? Like Zac mentioned, given the macro environment we were in, 2020, 2021, this was market-led in the sense that COVID compelled many of our customers to serve a wider range of businesses. Consumers who came online, gaining market share, increasing top line was the focus. We still see and are very close to a lot of the growth in digital payments and online marketplaces. But the increased regulatory scrutiny, the CFO agenda of vendor consolidation and very kind of cost-conscious has led to our customers definitely taking more of a balanced approach. So reducing customer acquisition costs, onboarding good customers that are the right fit, that's of growing importance. And luckily, being in the identity verification business, we are at the top of the funnel for that, right? So we see those changes on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, so.
Great. All right, let's see what our results are here. All right, so maximizing growth, that came in as number 1. Fraud reduction, reducing customer acquisition cost, and ensuring regulatory compliance, all tied there. And I think that actually makes sense because as we're going to go to here in just a moment, we are really seeing this balancing act that's happening within companies as you're trying to balance these different needs. Alan, what do you think of the poll results, and does this align with what you're seeing as you're working with customers, this really kind of spread of priorities and having to do this balancing act?
It's actually interesting to see that maximizing growth is still there. So obviously plenty of commercial and product folks on the call, which is good to see. But yeah, like that's it, right? It's a balancing act. We have kind of multiple levers that we are able to pull in our type of business in terms of what we see from a verification point of view, whether you're optimizing for speed or cost or performance or whether you're under regulatory scrutiny. So the fact that the results are spread out a little bit probably speaks to the fact that there are multiple competing priorities at the moment. It's not just all about land grab and top line growth. And that complicates the picture, right? Because whatever you do up front, top of the funnel, in terms of getting users online to your platform or service, kind of plays out downstream. So I think at the moment, we're doing a lot of kind of workshopping and talking to customers around figuring out what are you optimizing for. It's difficult to optimize for everything at the same time. You need to touch on all elements. But our most successful customers are optimizing for one thing, and then they have certain plays that then can downstream affect that. But yeah, interesting results.
Great. Zac, can you elaborate on some of the challenges that customers are seeing with global identity verification?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, listen, I think Alan, spoke, and the slide really speaks to the major challenge of this balancing act of how can we make sure that we are adhering to the specific regs and obligations and even internal risk approach with creating a good customer experience that avoids abandonment, that makes good long-term customers on there. And I also think that poll is pretty surprising about going back to growth. Maybe it's a soft landing for most of the economies out there, but let's lean into that. I think really if we talk about the challenges of a global identity verification stack, and we really want to prioritize growth, you really need to make sure you're employing a varied and multi-streamed identity verification technology path. And so what does that mean? I mean, that really means that, we're talking today a lot about data checks, right? So we're matching and pattern matching an identity graph against a set of data to make sure you are who you say you are, you're doing business with the right people. But there are other methodologies as well. You could connect to an electronic ID that are more prominent in Europe and some parts of Asia. You can do document checks. You can confirm with your bank accounts through some open banking rails. And so there are a variety of methods to solve this challenge. So let's use a more granular example. If you have a 20-year-old that's applying to your service, that's a thin file customer, you may choose to do a different order of operations for your identity proofing. If you have perhaps a more established individual that's a little older with multiple lines of credit that's been in the system for a long time, you might go at a completely different path. It's that operationalization and that determination of what to do, when, and how that's the most effective methodology to solve this balancing act. And if you really want to lean into growth, then what you have to do is choose the right solution at the right time for the right person in a dynamic way. And that can get really challenging when you're on a global deployment, multi-country, targeting multiple segments of a particular population and offering multiple different types of services. So a payments operation or a banking operation or a fintech, you might have different product suites that you're offering. You might have a variety of different customer segments. And you can't just create a single path and expect that that's going to work each and every time. Nor do you want to create that path and then have it go to a manual review or some other blocker that increases the friction and actually decreases the user experience and creates abandonment. So really, leaning into growth means you need to lean into the nuance and lean into the complexity. And often in our experience, what that means is adopting a platform approach where you can employ the right tool at the right time based on the characteristics of that application as it's coming in. And that takes a certain level of best practice, of nuance, and of understanding and assumptions that you need to make about what you want to choose when, and how can you lean into one area or the other, be it growth or high friction, if there's high risk users or high risk products that you're offering. So that's really how the challenge is approached today. And that's how to most effectively lean into growth if that's what you are operationalizing at the time.
I really like what you said there about leaning into the complexity. And I think part of like leaning into that complexity is making it so that the customer doesn't see that complexity, right? Because by leaning into that, you're making it very easy on their side, reducing that user friction, reducing any of those additional asks on them. And then it becomes very seamless for the customer.
Yeah, and you have to think about like, what did I miss, or what else can we do? And most organizations don't have the 20 years of traffic or experience to see all the different segments. So it becomes a really interesting mapping exercise from both a user experience, but a technology perspective, the regs, and really optimizing for growth in these cases, that you need to design a variety of different paths and have templates and approaches based on your vertical and what the best practices look like in each market. So when you're in 20 different countries and have all these different segments, it becomes a real end-by-end mathematical table that we love to see. And that's why identity is hard. But there's a lot of solutions out there of how to make this as seamless as possible for the users. And just like you said, Angie, they wouldn't know that they went down a certain path. It would just feel like a really organic, natural onboarding experience that's tailored for that individual. And if people that are listening today don't have that mapped out, that's what you need to do to maximize growth.
Absolutely. Does this resonate with your experience, Ellen, in supporting customers? And if so, can you share some examples of challenges you've encountered?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it does. I mean, Zac spoke to the wide range of verification services and ways of doing it, but certainly in the database and electronic verification space, we have a lot of conversations about ensuring that your verification process match market realities, because different data markets, different levels of maturity. So it's important to consider what you're optimizing for. A lot of the time we see customers take a very global approach to their compliance and onboarding process, which on the surface makes complete sense from an integration point of view, to try and have those standardized processes. So it makes things easier for the operational and technical teams around the process. But for global businesses, it's also important to support hyper-local processes too, to ensure they're kind of serving their customers in those markets in the most optimal way. We see things like market to market, the type of data sources available, the norms such as the address format and the name format. They all have regional nuances. ID numbers are required in China to verify. In the Netherlands, name verification relies heavily on the first initial as opposed to the first name, just the way data is stored there. In Paris and France, apartment numbers are very few and far between, so that specific data point as it relates to address verification is challenging. So ignoring or not knowing these individual market nuances can delay your onboarding process, can frustrate your customers, increase abandonment. So if you're considering working with a technology partner for identity verification, make sure they understand the global market and its nuances, right? So make sure they can show expertise, match to the right onboarding strategy, because we think that understanding is critical to onboarding success. If you're operating globally, taking a local approach and getting someone else to do that heavy lifting for you is where we see success.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. Being able to understand those local nuances, such as differences in address and how you're going to collect that data, makes such a huge difference for what type of verification rates you're going to get as an end result. Is that accurate, Alan? Is that kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. It's about thinking about your onboarding process holistically, but then being able to have the sophistication to map those individual journeys, and getting a partner who can do that for you is best. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. And we are going to, so Alan's going to walk us later through a case study where he's going to talk through how we helped one of our customers do this optimization across multiple markets, and really looking at those different nuances of, what type of data do you need to collect in order to optimize your onboarding rates? What kind of data sources should you be using? So, I'm really excited for that. And I just wanted to highlight that, as that's going to be coming up here in just a minute. Let me go forward here. So, I think this is really interesting, and it brings us to a good point when we're looking at how our businesses doing this today. There's a lot of complexity globally, and what we're seeing is that businesses are left to stitch together a number of different and oftentimes overlapping solutions, including IDV, credit bureaus, address verification, watch lists, document verification. So it becomes very complex very quickly. To try to balance all these competing priorities. One report we cited here says the average business is managing 8 different point solutions to verify identity. But in talking to our customers, we've heard numbers as high as 20 that they're using 20 different vendors across the globe in order to conduct their identity verification and onboarding. So that brings us to our next poll. We thought it might be fun to just get from the audience here, approximately how many point solutions do you use to verify identity across customer journey? So we have A, 1 to 4, B, 5 to 8, C, 9 to 14, or D, 15 or more. I'm hoping we don't have too many in that 15 or more. That seems like it would be a logistical nightmare.
But it does happen. And again, over time, I think that organizations have really just stacked to get an extra % or 2 here and there. We often see it in the fraud and risk part of the life cycle as well. And sometimes, stacking those different technologies is a smart move because you get a larger coverage of potential risk indicators. But it becomes very challenging to manage all of these vendors and technologies. And there's a lot of overlap that I think as innovation happens, you don't realize what some platforms can do and what you can take away or what stops working as good as it did years ago. And again, identity evolves over time, the regs evolve over time. And so if those technologies aren't evolving similarly, it can be challenging and you could be creating a lot of waste.
Exactly. And I think too, there's a lot of times adding but not subtracting, right? So you're adding new solutions, but like taking that time to optimize, go back and look at your onboarding process to see where those efficiencies are, I think is just as important, right?
Yeah, and we also see even different business units that struggle with this too, like all companies. Like our company's no different, right? You have 2 different business units that aren't necessarily always talking to each other using very similar tools.
Exactly. All right, let's go to our results here. All right, so 1 to 4 came in 60% here, 20% in the 5 to 8 range, 9 to 14, 20%, and nobody managing more than 15.
Hey, there you go, a very efficient group. I like it.
I do, I love it. All right. So Zac, can you give us a little background on how Trulioo helps customers optimize onboarding?
Definitely. So listen, we believe that it requires data at scale to be truly efficient and optimized. I mean, that's just critical to success today because of what we talked about earlier with the nuance and with the variations from market to market that happens. So listen, we are a powerhouse on this, in this realm. We take it very seriously. We've been at it for a very long time. So what these numbers reflect are one of our product suites, which is much closer to the data verification methodology. And so over 70 countries are active there. Customers tend to apply a lot of data. But the way that you apply it, that's really the secret to what we're talking about in terms of applying which data assets when, and not just throwing them all combined together. That's how you operate efficiently. So you're constantly refining and improving not only the pathway of when to use each source of information, but how those sources of information are built. So, these are the quantity of sources that are there, but just as an engine, it takes hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of integration updates and enhancements to optimize not only the deployment, but the system as a whole. And so, this is the significant costs that we bear on behalf of organizations that just want a plug-and-play solution to manage the entire ecosystem of partnerships and data assets into a single unified platform. So you can thread together a variety of different solutions, and within each methodology itself, there's a huge amount of optimizations that happen and occur. And maybe we can skip to the next slide, Angie, and we'll talk about, more on a micro level how this looks. These configurations and creating an optimized deployment is actually unique to each organization. And so you can start with best practices, and you start with a template and a default that we see working for most organizations in a particular vertical, in a particular market, targeting a particular demographic. But to maximize performance, you really need a dynamic system. And that includes expanding your ecosystem of databases and data partners in core markets and external. It includes, real-time analysis to understand what's unique and what the characteristics are of your particular activity in that digital transaction universe. And then it really comes to applying the latest innovation and technology in terms of AI, ML, algorithmic interpretation and prediction to really take a look at what is the transaction by transaction level most optimized methodology and deployment configuration so that you can extract the largest value for what you are consuming. So for example, one transaction basis might take a look at these three sources are the most effective, but a different transaction will be a variety of others. So this can actually go from a country by country level to a regional level, to a product level, to an actual demographic level of each user. And I think the big takeaway is that this is a highly sophisticated and nuanced science, and you want to make sure you're applying the appropriate analytic techniques and tools so you can get that granular layer and view about what's successful when and how.
Great. And we actually had a question come through here, Zac. So what is the lift and or effort to optimize onboarding commercially, technically, and looking at like development resources?
Yeah, I mean, it's high when you're a growing organization or when you're trying to build these tools from scratch yourself. And I think there's the age-old adage in tech, you focus on what you're good at and you partner with organizations that are focused on what they're good at. And we do this at scale. So, we are constantly adding new data assets to our platform. We're constantly adding interoperable parts and pieces that you can deploy as part of a parallel service. And this is what a platform approach grants you, is doing that cost effectively and efficiently at scale. So for our customers, the lift is zero. And for organizations that have tried and been in the digital environment for a while, they had to build this from scratch starting 10 years ago. Some of our large payments and marketplace customers, I'm sure household brands, and they've just shifted all of that infrastructure to a platform like ours because of those efficiency gains. So for us, it's a best practice and a science that we've gotten very good at for organizations trying to do this themselves. It's very expensive to maintain hundreds and hundreds of different integrations, different partners, and making sure that they're optimized and getting and extracting the value that you need.
Great. Yeah, I think that was a great question.
Yeah, I think
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ellen.
Sorry, and I was going to say that's a great point, Zac, and we've seen obviously being able to do this globally, so like market by market, assess kind of the individual data points in each market, the customer's data quality, their processes, and then being able to kind of like sum that up and look at it kind of at a macro scale. That's helped our customers quite a lot as well, right? We're not doing point by point improvements and solutions. They're able to see like what's going to move the needle in this market versus there, and then we kind of come to an overall view. So their exec and partner managers can see the overall ask and the overall potential improvements, because of course we deal with obviously individual country managers and folks who are responsible for a particular process, but it's important that they think about the other processes in that business and the other countries and the other areas. So we have the insights to be able to do that, which has been kind of a great part of learning for us as we've gone through this journey this year to really focus in on helping our customers optimize their processes.
Agreed. And everyone listening today should do that A/B test, right? You should take a look at different technology solutions. Each of them, even deploying a solution for identity, takes resources and engineering. So I think that everybody needs to make sure that they're doing the business case analysis. And we often find success, but there might be a different solution that works for customers. So, you really want to make sure you're building your business case and A/B testing these solutions so that you can predict how much it's going to cost internally to operate.
Exactly. No, I think that's a great point. All right. So the part I'm most excited about our case study here. So Alan's, could you share with us this case study that we did with one of our leading payment platforms?
Yeah, sure. This company is a global remittance company, so focused on supporting folks who want to transfer money globally. So quite aligned with our general approach and values of financial inclusion here at Trulioo. And they have the challenge, right, of like increasing regulatory compliance, a lot of ongoing audits. But still, from a business point of view, wanting to prioritize swift, cost-effective onboarding. So trying to strike that balance requires like a detailed, refined process, supported by a partner with expertise in this area, such as us. So they turn to us to try initiate an onboarding optimization effort to try and see where could they gain any advantage or any change in improving the cost of acquiring a verified high-value user, right? So they wanted to identify opportunities to increase onboarding efficiencies without necessarily compromising the speed, the accuracy, or the compliance or user experience. So what we did was we effectively did a combination of detailed live assessments, as Zac has referenced before. We have access to these marketplaces. We have access to these sources at scale. Data source analysis, rule set optimization, right? It's really important to some of the things I spoke about earlier on in terms of localizing that rule. So this customer, like many of you on the call, will be regulated and licensed by multiple different licenses in different geographies. We were able to optimize different rules for different geographies as well to make sure that they still remained compliant. And effectively, the outcome of doing this was effectively custom-built source packages, custom-built rules, and the ability to increase their verification rates without necessarily increasing the cost. So huge impact in the sense that they were effectively able to automatically onboard more customers who may have dropped off in the journey otherwise, or would have gone through more frictionful, costly onboarding processes. So, Angie, if you go to the next slide, actually, some of the headline results are on this slide, but like at a high level, we were able to basically onboard kind of an influx of new users, and each verification rate percentage uplift from the program equaled an estimated $56,000 increase in annual revenue, right? So that led to a total of about $1.5 million per year, basing that on this customer's lifetime value of a customer, what it meant to get someone through the funnel from sign up to effectively fully verified and transacting. So that's why it's so interesting, right? Even a small tweak in the onboarding process to maximize who can trade and who can act on their platform had huge top line results without necessarily increasing their cost base or without compromising the user experience or any compliance needs. So they were able to do that with, as Zac said, zero lift and minimal to no additional investment. It effectively stems solely from the value optimization program they ran with Trulioo. Oh, Angie, can't hear you if you're speaking. You might be on mute.
Thanks, Alan. It's great to see these results. And I think it's important to point out too that, this is based on a fairly conservative estimate of the lifetime value of a customer. As we're working with some of our, trading platforms or things like that, we see that they have much higher lifetime value estimates for their customers. So, depending on the line of business you're in, some of these, what looks like small incremental jumps can have a really large impact on revenue, on your onboarding rates.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Angie, and because we've ran these in partnership in a consultative way with our customers, right? That's front and center, right? What are you optimizing for? What does it mean to you to increase the funnel of onboarded users? If the lifetime value of your user base is in the lower range, we do these things by range, then it might require a significant uplift to make a change to your cost profile. If not, it may be the case that 0.5% or 1% has huge value to you, and you're willing to pay more for that, or not, the case would be. So us understanding that up front in terms of what's meaningful and what's material has then guided what is quite a complicated and detailed assessment that we do, which, like I said, we do all the lift on our end, and it's extensive and the options are vast, but those parameters and understanding those parameters and not trying to do all things for everyone gave us the kind of insight and scope to carefully craft these results and then see them in live.
Yeah, and the only last thing I'll add is, this customer was kind enough to allow us to share some of their anonymous data. North America and the US and Canada and the UK are very mature markets. So as Alan was stating, these percentage lifts are actually quite significant when you think about where they were operating initially to post of the optimization. We see a lot of really interesting growth opportunities in many of the European markets, as where the configurations tend to have been static for some time, but there are a lot of incentives today to work through an optimization process and see double-digit gains often than not. So it's a really interesting and available process to go through. And I think the lesson is, you need to be constantly looking at your deployments and your architecture and make sure that you have a critical lens around how you can effectively update what you're doing to take advantage of the changing ecosystem, but also the changing environment in which you operate your business in, because there are always benefits there. And mostly this falls into a user experience lane, but collectively attacking this issue or this opportunity across the various sort of roles in your organization makes for a very effective opportunity for uplift.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because as I've seen with working with these value optimizations, there's definitely a balance with each company. So it's not a one size fits all. There's what is the risk appetite of your company? What are your goals as far as onboarding good users? So there's a lot of those considerations that have to go into ultimately deciding what's that optimal solution. All right, and with that, let me take us to the next slide here. So Zac, would you mind wrapping up for any businesses looking to optimize the cost of a good verified customer? What are some of the criteria that they should be looking for in a solution?
So, it's a really, we're good. We firmly believe that organizations need to make the best decisions for themselves, right? And so what's the best technological opportunity for you? What's the best identity solution for you based on your criteria and who you are as an organization? So these are some high-level points that we believe needs to be considered for anyone in that buying decision or anyone in that scenario where we're looking to either upgrade or take advantage of a new identity solution for your organization. So the first one is, the keyword being comprehensive. And I think we saw, at least in this, the attendees today, that most are actually not using a lot of tools. But what we typically see for our enterprise level customers is a variety of different tools that often have repetitive nature or hard to move, hard to replace, hard to shift in the right time. They don't function as part of a greater whole. And so when we think about identity today, it requires a platform approach. And there are a variety of different platforms out there, but what we believe is the most important is operating a platform that can not only dynamically adjust what solution you use when, but that has the native capabilities to actually build and roll out that technology. So not just plugging in a bunch of third-party solutions that they're not sure or can't configure to your particular specific needs, but ones that can touch the technology, write the code, can make adjustments, as well as interoperably apply whatever solution you want. So that's a really important piece, because what that means is you can future-proof what you're building and what you're deploying. So when there is a regulatory change, when there is a growth opportunity, when there is a demographic shift, when there is a cost concern or burden or expansion, you can take advantage of that very quickly without having to license, adjust, take new engineering resources, etc. Global is always a piece for us, and listen, there might be single market organizations on the webinar today, and that's great, but most organizations, even within a single country, have regional differences or have plans to grow internationally, or they might have cross-border requirements about someone who's new to country that they don't have a footprint in the local market they're operating in. So global coverage is essential in today's identity landscape, we personally believe. But as Alan talked a lot about earlier, that local expertise of what makes someone different in the UK versus Germany versus Canada versus Australia versus, India, etc. So that local expertise to understand those differences is crucial. And the data source integrations, again, this really flows through or the flexibility of what you want to use when, and avoiding the requirement for you as an organization to go out to build your own tools necessarily. So having data source integrations that are plug and play and ready to go, and you can just choose the ones that work best based on analytical work, then that's critical for many identity solutions that you're going to want to have. And I think we can take that one step further and say not only data source integrations, but also different identity tools that you want to leverage, whether it's a risk tool, a fraud tool, a document tool, a more integrated third-party solution like open banking, etc. And the last piece is for organizations that are either launching a new product, have a business unit that needs a very quick to market solution, or mid-market organizations that are smaller and haven't necessarily built out the most sophisticated engines yet. You really want those workflows that you can drag and drop and deploy quickly for any scenario that comes up. So, no code, low code has been around for a little while. Tying together that low code workflow with a flexible, versatile identity solution is really important to handle the changing environment and to take advantage of all the nuance in your particular market. So, again, these pieces, you'll have to, as an organization, rank which ones are the most important, which are critical, which are needed now versus later. But if you think about, I want to choose a solution that I can partner with for years and years to come, these tend to be the four big pieces that we see most important and that we recommend customers or just, buyers in any situation, partners, what have you, to really take a look at and build business cases around so you make the right solution for your organization.
Great. Thank you, Zac. All right. So now we have about 15 minutes here for Q&A. And I see we have, I'll pose this question to you, Zac, because I think this goes along with the best practices we were talking about. I have to make a purchase decision in Q1 2024 about a new service we're launching that requires a robust onboarding process. Can you walk us through what types of questions we should ask to determine the best provider?
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the last slide we sort of talked about four big buckets of what those are critical pieces. So I think you really have to tie tangible operational examples to each one of those. So for example, let's take the last one we talked about, the no code, low code. So I think a critical question is how fast can I test and beta test your solution? So if organizations cannot spin up live solutions for you to beta test, but also A/B test in different scenarios, then I think that's an issue for anyone. I know there are some solutions out there that are very challenging to get live production data for, right? You might have employees, colleagues, but how do you test it against your existing customer base? Those are really important aspects to make sure you explore when you're making a buying decision. And I think the other two pieces that I would say is you need to really map your vertical to the technology provider's experience. So do they have experience solving these issues specifically for your vertical and your use cases? Because while many digital organizations have similarities and there's pattern matching always, there are some significant nuances between a payments company, a wealth management company, a fintech organization, a remittance, a marketplace, et cetera. And even within those verticals, obviously there are very, important nuances as well. So you really need to pressure test an organization's experience within your use case, and your type of customer is critical to that piece. And I think the last one is, I believe identity requires a multi-product strategy and a layered approach. I really do. I don't think there's a one size fits all. I just don't believe that that's the most advantageous solution to get the most customers at the most cost-effective manner. And so what you also, if I was going to be a buyer and ask questions, I would want to see tangible evidence of an organization adding and layering new technologies and new methodologies for solving the identity challenge in their digital ecosystem that you operate in. So what solutions have they added in the recent memory, and what kind of life cycle and customer journey has that enabled and allowed for? A big piece for us of late has been business verification, verifying micro merchants, verifying businesses that they operate in. And a very interesting use case within that has been, I want to make sure I know who that the individual that's submitting that business verification request actually works and is employed by that organization, which was sort of part of a recent EBA guideline and interpretation. And so has the technology provider that you're speaking to added tools to be able to do that, right? And so what's that evolution in the technology itself, as opposed to just new features? Like, have they created tangible advancements to speak to the changing identity landscape. I think that's a really important point because it just shows the path that your technology partner is on, and that will allow you to future-proof. So those are sort of the three pieces: A/B testing and beta testing, your verticals and use cases, and adding new tools to the platform or the solution are really the three critical questions that I think buyers need to ask and make sure they write business cases around, so that you're picking a solution that you're going to have for a long time.
Thanks, Zac. I just remind everybody that there's a Q&A box on the right-hand side lower. So if you want to put in those questions, please do. All right, and we have one more question here. I work in user experience, and I find that there's always a challenge coordinating with compliance/risk and vice versa. Do you have any best practices on how to strike the right balance to work together? And I don't know who wants to take that one, Zac or Ellen.
Go for it.
Yeah, I can certainly speak to how we've seen, and this is actually some of my experience previously in launching financial products for an international bank. We used, and I've seen this change recently, where we used to kind of, risk and compliance were very much the end of the decision, right? In terms of, right, we've done all this work now, let's get risk and compliance sign off. So where we see a lot of value in our customers, and where we advise as they go through this onboarding optimization process, is to make sure that they're part of the story, right? So everything has parameters. Risk and compliance can historically being seen as a kind of a back office function, but ultimately bringing their expertise to the fore, understanding the parameters that they're willing to play with, what their risk appetite is, what levers can be, what can be optimized, what can't be. So I think bringing them and consulting with them and part of the user experience journey that you're on is critical, right, from the start, not leaving them to a sign-off point later in the journey, which historically I've seen happen quite a bit. So I think moving forward, getting their input, consulting regularly with them, asking us or your technology partner that you're working with, what are the typical things that you've seen, and what decision points need to be made to get this signed off, is a key change that I've seen. The most successful businesses that get to market faster with a change have included those folks and those functions from the start.
Thanks, Alan. All right, another question came through. So how do you see delegated authentication playing a role in verification and reducing SCA/3DS friction later on in the UX? Do you want to take that one, Zac?
Yeah, sure. That's a deep question that requires, I think, a lot of deep analysis. It's a really interesting one. I'll take a slant on it of something that I've recently experienced. I was recently at a conference that was very much on the sort of downstream payments, risk, and authentication piece. And so, I mean, listen, I believe there's a gap in the market, and hopefully this answers the individual's question at a high level, and happy to speak about this a little bit more offline after the webinar. But listen, I believe there's a big gap actually today in the market, and part of it has been driven by a lot of siloed solutions, and part of it has just been driven by the rapid growth of regulations and different teams responsible in different areas of the verification and the life cycle of an end user. But I believe there's a big gap between the account initiation and what we collect, and the footprint and the profile of an individual when we're doing the initial verification, whether that's for KYC or KYB or some other kind of risk-based approach to make sure you have good users entering your platform. And there's a gap there between leveraging that information and that footprint, that profile for follow-on authentication. And what is possible by tying those together a lot better and more efficiently and more effectively is hopefully the potential of reducing that friction later on. And so, the question mentions strong customer authentication, 3DS. and delegated authentication, which is allowing a third party to manage that authentication downstream. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to allow for delegated authentication when those solutions are woven and tied together with the verification initially. And it should be a much clearer indication of risk. You should be able to leverage those elements in the verification process downstream and along the authentication, fraud prevention, account takeover, all of those different methodologies and sequences and scenarios that you encounter as a user is trying to access your service over time. We all know that there are sort of triggers that require further verification and further assurance levels. And so while I don't know if there's the best solution out there today, I do think that that's the journey that we're on and the path that we're on to tie those together. So there are risks to every solution, and there are your regulatory obligations that are constantly changing. And speaking very quickly to this, I can't believe that we're already at PSD 3, and which is speaking to a lot of these pieces. So this is a really interesting question that I think takes a lot of thought, but generally overall, I do think those pieces should work better together. It requires a platform and interoperability to get there.
Absolutely. Well, and I would add too that I think, that onboarding is such an important part of that overall customer journey. So if you have strong identity verification at the onboarding piece, you're making sure that you're bringing on those good customers and hopefully weeding out as many of the bad actors as you can at the beginning. And that's going to, help with reducing fraud rates, things like that, which has downstream effects with helping with requirements for PSD 3. All right. I see. Oh, yeah, we had another question come through. Is it possible for a company to rely on a vendor entirely for identity verification?
I mean, listen, from a technology perspective, the answer is yes for the actual verification component. There's always internal controls and internal requirements, logs, audit trails, record keeping requirements. So it really depends on your organization specifically. But if we're talking about relying on a third party, on a partner to do the actual verification, the risk analysis, et cetera, then absolutely. There are a variety of different elements to the entire life cycle, whether that's case management, whether it's transaction monitoring, whether there's like the previous question asked around ongoing authentication. So this is a very nuanced question, but let's just stick to very, granularly the account opening process. You should absolutely be able to find a partner that can handle that, both from a risk tolerance as well as a regulatory KYC, KYB perspective to handle that for you.
Great. And we're almost at the hour, so I'll go ahead and wrap here. Thanks for joining us today, Zac and Ellen, and for everybody who tuned in. We look forward to hearing more about how these trends may develop. If you have any feedback on today's webinar or any recommendations for future topics, please do complete the short survey at the end of this webinar. It should flash up on the screen shortly after. It's been a pleasure bringing you this webinar, so do keep a lookout for the Finovate blog for recordings on this and all other webinars and new thought leadership content updated regularly. Thank you and goodbye.